So what we're going to be covering today is an overview of the next couple of months. So from now to the time when interviews are happening and wrapping up is about 7 months, and then matching is in about 8 months. So the goal here is to give you guys like a guidepost to know, like, are you on track? What's happening? What to expect at the next stage? There'll be some instruction to point you in the right direction as far as what to actually do on your applications. But a lot of that actual meat will be in the GC Prep videos that we'll talk about. We'll have more webinars later. This is really just to help you guys get a lay of the land so that you feel oriented really coming into this process. So as far as disclosures go, I am the founder and co-owner of GC Prep, which is a for-profit entity. So here's our agenda. We'll talk about the background of GC Prep, why we formed. We'll look at some team members. We'll talk about what match stats were for last year and what your goals should be. Then we'll do that kind of timeline overview and talk about what you should be doing when, some of the common pitfalls, and what we recommend to be successful. And finally, we'll wrap up with how GC Prep can really help you change your likelihood of matching for the better. So as a company, we really have two main goals. Okay, so the first goal is to provide applicants with a clear path through this process. There are a lot of things to know about the fields of genetic counseling, and you're kind of expected to know what's going on in current events. But it's also hard to know what's expected of you as an applicant. Like, how do you be successful in this process? Like, if you're applying, then you haven't been successful at this before, which is fine, right? We're all coming to the field that way. But how do you know when you're doing it right? Because that can help you not only be successful, but also feel confident when you're going through this process. And we also want to make sure that you have the guidance you need to present your best self, not a perfect candidate, because that doesn't exist. But really the way to be successful as you go through this application process is to be your most authentic self and to truly show who you actually are and what's important to you, and let admission see kind of the good and the bad and the ways that you have progressed. And it's that authenticity that's really going to get you farthest in this process, but it can be really scary to show those things, like an authentic side of you, because we all have flaws that we don't want to expose. But it's important to kind of embrace those and allow admissions to see who you fully are. And that can take practice at being willing to drop those walls and opening yourself up. And so getting guidance and mentorship through this process can help you become more comfortable with opening yourself up to admissions. The other goal here is that we do our part to address the inequities and the issues with diversity that are kind of plaguing the fields of genetic counseling. And last year we kind of had our day of reckoning, right? They did the like a whole survey of the field and investigation of the field, and found like blatant racism and discrimination in genetic counseling and the policies. And that's not okay, right? And people had kind of known about some of those things on an unofficial level, but it really came out officially and formally this last year, which was very uncomfortable for a lot of people in the field. So that created these two goals are kind of in opposition to one another in some ways, right? So first of all, I feel very strongly that everyone should be compensated for their time, right? Genetic counselors are chronically underpaid typically in most positions. And when you guys become genetic counselors, I expect that you want to be paid for your time, if that's normal. But we also want to make sure that we're not only providing a service that people of means can access, because that would make disparities worse. So what are we doing to address that? right? So right now, our video modules, which there's 24 hours of video, are free to underrepresented applicants, whether that's racial, financial, or LGBTQIA+. And you can apply for that under the financial age tab. But it is an ongoing goal. Like right now, we don't have free access to one-on-one coaching, even though we want to be able to offer that in the future. That is our goal, to be able to offer free coaching to people who are underrepresented and in financial need. So hopefully in the next year or so, our goal is to develop a 501c charitable arm of GC Prep that will be able to receive grants and donations and things to be able to offer these coaching services free for people who need it financially. Okay? So that's an ongoing goal for us. So let's go ahead and meet our team. There's me, I'm Michaela, right? So I founded GC Prep in February of 2021. I had been invited to speak at a pre-GC club at my alma mater undergrad, and that was very fun. And we tried to actually get a pre-genetic counseling major going, but it really needed a class that was specific to all the issues that people applying to grad school needed to know. And it became clear that they were not going to fund a new class, which was a bummer. But with that thought, I decided, I could make this class and then it wouldn't just be available to people at this undergraduate institution, it would be available internationally if we needed it. And so that's how I decided to come up with GC Prep. At first, it was just videos. And over time, we added the one-on-one sessions, the longer-term mentorship, and small groups that we'll talk about in a little bit. As I was interviewing counselors for our videos and trying to find people to reach out, I contacted Janelle, who I knew from my graduate program. I wanted to ask her some questions about diversity, and I'd read some papers that she'd published on issues with racism and diversity in genetic counseling. And I explained to her what she was doing, and she wanted to get involved. So we reorganized the business to be a two-party LLC, and now she is the co-owner with me. And over time, then we added our coaches. So Jessa, who's on tonight, here you are, and then also Jessica here are both genetic counselors and also certified life coaches. So they do a lot of our small groups and our long-term mentorship, so up to 6 months or more. That's really holistic, not just application help, but really supporting you with everything you need, confidence, other building activities to help just support you through this whole process. Andy also does some mentorship. He is a genetic counselor and also an entrepreneur. He has his own consulting genetic counseling firm out of Pennsylvania. Shana and Anna are relatively new grads. They're within the last 5 years, and they do coaching for us. And then also here's Janice Berliner. She does our premium coaching services. She's the program director at the BayPath program. So that can be really helpful for people as they apply to have a program director look over their stuff before they submit it and get feedback from someone in the position that's going to be reading it at the schools they apply to. Right? The only limitation is our clients cannot apply to BayPath University if they are doing a premium service, or if they are applying to BayPath, you cannot have a premium service with Janice, right? That's a conflict of interest that we just can't have. So we do have that limitation. Okay. All right, so let's talk about successful applicants. Ideally, it's not an ideal world, but ideally, we would have passion, emotional intelligence and insight, and also academic achievement. And all of those things would work together and be well balanced in an applicant. And that's kind of like the holy grail of what a program is looking for. However, most applicants are not going to be this balanced, and that's okay, right? There's just some things we need to know as we approach this application process, especially if you feel like you might be an unbalanced applicant. So people who have lower academic scores, maybe their GPA is lower than is typically seen as the average for that program. with lower academics, it can be harder to get interviews, right? It's usually at that point where we see a little bit more of the sticking. And for people who are totally fine with their academics, maybe they are high achievers, but if they lack emotional intelligence, or if they lack the ability to be insightful about their experiences, maybe they get interviews, but they're going to have a hard time matching and being accepted because they didn't have the depth that was being looked for. So for most applicants, there's this big slice missing, and it might be different sizes for different people, and it's totally normal. It's totally normal. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with potentially lacking in one of these areas. And it does not mean that you cannot be successful. What we need to do is just balance out your pie chart, right? So if you have a lower academic achievement, let's bulk you up and make you stronger in the emotional intelligence or insight portion, right? If you have great academic achievement, but you're feeling uncomfortable with, I don't understand what I'm supposed to be getting out of like my crisis work, or I don't understand how to talk about my shadowing opportunities in a way that's meaningful, then let's bulk you up there, okay? But especially for people who are coming to this process with a lower GPA, we just need to make sure that your application documents, like your statement of purpose, is exceptional. Like it's significantly better than others, so that you can make up that, not necessarily deficit, but you can make up what you could be lacking compared to other applicants, so that you can be back on the same playing field. And we did have clients last year who were coming to this with significantly lower GPAs and had been not offered interviews for the past couple of years, and then were able to get interviews and even matched this last cycle. So it is definitely possible to make this work regardless of what your particular pie chart looks like. The only thing that we can't help you with is your passion, right? That's got to be you bringing that to the table. And we can help you show that or express that. But what you're feeling about the field yourself, that's something that you'll need to take care of. And if you are planning to do genetic counseling and then in a couple of years go on to something else like medical school or something, skip the genetic counseling part, right? These seats in a genetic counseling program are like a very precious resource in the field. So admissions wants to fill all their seats with people who it's their end goal really to be a genetic counselor. And that doesn't mean you can't have growth after, but they want people who are going to stay in the field long term, because we desperately need genetic counselors out there, not people who graduate, get their boards, and then in a couple of years leave the field. So let's talk about what match stats were and what your goals should be. So our overall goal that we have for you is confidence at the time of application, confidence at the time of your interviews, and confidence while waiting for match day. And that doesn't mean arrogance, okay? None of us can assume that we'll match. And obviously GC Prep nor any other service can promise you that you will match, okay? That's not a realistic promise that anyone can make. But what confidence means is that you're entering each phase, the applying part, the interviewing part, the waiting part, knowing that you've done all that you can and that you're proud of how you presented yourself, okay? That you can do this process with no regrets. Whatever happens at match time will happen, but if we can get you to the place where you feel confident in the process, then you can move forward with a lot more self-assurance in your value, and you'll have more energy to move forward with whatever the outcome may be, whether that's preparing for school or whether it's deciding if you need to apply again. Okay? It's just going to be a much more healthy process all around if we can get you to a place where you're confident. Okay. Especially reapplicants, the most important thing that you can do right now is reject the negative self-talk. And if you haven't experienced that already, like that's amazing. But there'll probably come a time, probably many times, where there's going to be self-doubt and negative self-talk if you were not successful last year. Being a reapplicant is not a detriment to you, okay? It is not an insurmountable problem. It should not be embarrassing. Many, many, many people are reapplicants, and you can be just as successful, right? If anything, it shows your dedication, and it gives you the opportunity to gain even more experiences and present yourself as a more mature applicant. Like, there's nothing wrong with being a reapplicant. And we can help you turn that experience that was very difficult for you a few months ago into something that's made you stronger and something that's really propelled you forward. So for last cycle, about 2,067 people applied, 1,065 got interviews, which is about 51%, and about half of those matched, okay? So at each stage, we're shaving off about half of people who apply each time, okay? So the total match rate was 26.5% last year. That has stayed pretty constant over the last few years. So there are more applicants applying each year typically, but they're also adding seats to the programs each year. So we've stayed around 26 or so percent. So what does that mean for your goals? First of all, the next thing on your to-do list is to crush applications to get interviews, right? That's your first goal. So forget the final goal of matching. We'll think about that one later. Your focus that you should have right now is making sure that your documents that you're submitting are so compelling that they can't not give you an interview invitation. They have to meet you and talk to you. And then once we get there, once we get those invites, then our goal is to deliver your most authentic self during the interview process. And as GC Prep, our goal is to increase your chance of matching with coaching and mentorship, okay? Because that has been a proven way to increase your chances. Now, when I say proven, what does that mean? Like, why should you trust what I'm saying, right? So does it work? Yes, it does, okay? So the national match rate, acceptance rate, about 26.5%, and that's just applying on your own. And that's with access to all the free online resources that everyone else has access to, right? Engaging in GC Prep services, and we'll talk about what all these services are kind of towards the end. When we saw people who did any type of coaching or mentorship and they watched our educational videos, their match rate went up to 87.5%. So we can't guarantee that you'll match, but we can guarantee that we're going to significantly improve your chances, because that's what we've seen with our data from last year. Now our N is small, right? Last year was our first year in business, and actually today is our 1-year anniversary of going live with services. Okay? So we'll continue to watch these numbers over the years, but this is what we've seen with last cycle. Okay? Also, as we click through this timeline of what you should be doing in the next couple months and how GC Prep can help you, whenever you see a star, just know that there's an educational video specifically on that topic that's going to give you way, way, way more information on how to do it right than we can go over today. Okay, so what should you be doing now? If you haven't already, create a timeline and set goals for yourself. So make sure you set dates to draft out your statement. Make sure, obviously, that the application dates for the schools that you're interested in are on there, but also be sure to include time for rest and self-care. Okay, this is a long process. It's going to be grueling, especially if you've done it before. Be sure to build in time for yourself to just have a night off, have a weekend off, do the things that you want to do. Okay? People who are international applicants have even more to coordinate. There's more stuff to think about with how you're funding your program, and there's more stuff to think about with visas, and there is a video specifically for international applicants with everything extra you should be thinking about there as well. You'll want to register for the match that opens on September 7th. Okay, you'll need to include your national match number on the top of your statement of purpose and your CV. That is a required registration that you have when you go to rank your programs after interviews. So if you have not, for some reason, registered for the match, by the time you submit your applications, they're not going to consider you because they can't rank you in the system, right? So make sure you register. And if you register and there's a fee associated with it, if you don't feel like you can pay the fee, there is a scholarship available for that. So there's a way to get that waived. And there's usually information on most program websites and the National Match Service on how to apply for that. So now you should be trying to find the people who are going to give you your 3 letters of recommendation. Okay. Make sure they know you well enough. We talked about this a little bit before we started, but make sure they know you well enough to provide specific information. And also check with them beforehand to make sure it's a positive recommendation. When admissions get these letter of recommendations and they're like, yeah, they're fine, that's really concerning. Like a lukewarm letter of recommendation is definitely like an eyebrow raiser. So you don't want that. So it's okay to ask the people, that you're requesting this of, like, do you feel comfortable providing me a recommendation? Do you feel like you could really recommend me positively in this situation? And if they say no, that's okay. Just have a follow-up question like, what do you think my weaknesses are that you would want me to improve, right? And that's a good learning opportunity for you and something that you can take that moment of disappointment and use it for your benefit. Okay? But again, we have a whole video on that. Okay? A note about letters of recommendations. Do not lie on any part of your application, including your letters of recommendation. While it seems stupid, there have been people who have forged letters of recommendation in the past, but genetic counseling is such a small field that the people who are reading them may know the people who wrote the letter of recommendation, and they may call to check in. If you are found to have lied on one of these documents, you will be banned from the match this year and next year at least, and so it will be many years until you could apply again. So don't lie. It's not worth it. Again, it's okay if you do not have a genetic counselor as one of your 3 recommenders. That is totally fine. It's much better for you to have people who know you well, as far as your skills at work and your character as a human. It's much better to have people who know you authentically than to have a genetic counselor that you shadowed with for a couple of days or you did an interview with that doesn't really know you, because they're not going to be able to really recommend you. At this point, you should also be researching schools, and there is so many things. There's so many things to consider about each school. We have a video specifically on that breaks down 9 different criteria that you should be thinking about for each school and kind of considering what would be best for you: class size, rotation type, cost, obviously, location, like lots of different things for you to consider. And one of the ways to help you choose a school is we have a program map on the website that's free to use, and it will allow you to filter schools by different criteria. So if you know you want to be in a program that's smaller than 8 people, for example, then you can filter by small programs. Or if you know you only want to be on the East Coast, then you can filter by location or cost or these other metrics. And so the goal of that map is to help people discover programs that they normally would not have considered that might be a better fit for them. Okay. So definitely check out that resource. We are in the process of trying to update it. So most schools are just getting around to updating their website materials for this coming application cycle. So we can't really update our map until those schools have updated their information. So we'll hopefully be able to update in the next month or so. As you are picking schools, be sure to write down why you want to specifically go there, right? Because the schools are going to want to know, like, why are you interested in our program? And so having an answer for that is going to just help you when you get to interviews and even when you're writing your paper, just to know what specifically about that program is appealing to you. If you don't seem to have all the prereqs for a program, that's okay. If you have something you think could fill the prerequisite, but it's not like an exact match in like title or names, like go ahead and email the program and just check. But if you are missing like 2 or more prerequisites for a program, that's going to be a bigger stretch. But if there's one that you don't quite have or you're in the process, you can go ahead and check with them to see what their thoughts are. It shouldn't deter you from a school if you don't have one specific thing yet, if you can complete it by the time interviews roll around. Okay. And finally, right now, you should be continuing to add to your experiences on your CV. So counselor interviews, if you can get them, shadowing, crisis work, volunteering. If you're having a hard time reaching genetic counselors, we have 11 hours of counselor videos that, you know, we do really detailed, kind of straightforward and barefaced, really, interviews with them to get kind of the good, bad, and the ugly about the field. And so you can watch those and kind of write down your thoughts and analyze them as an observer. And you can include that on your CV as well. As you do these experiences, make sure that you reflect on what these interactions have taught you about you. Okay? Admissions doesn't really care what specifically you've done. They care what you have learned from it. Okay, so as you go through this process, it's not enough to just be present. We need to see your analysis, your insight of what you've gained from each of these experiences that you've had. And so as you do these experiences, be sure to brainstorm any poignant moments that you've had, because that'll give you fodder to discuss in your statement, to talk about in interviews, and really how these experiences and how your analysis of these experiences have influenced like why you want to become a genetic counselor. Because the answer, I want to become a genetic counselor to help people, is not sufficient. It's not good enough. So we need to really have a deep understanding of what the field of genetic counseling is and what genetic counselors can do and how they can be of value for you to be able to answer that question in a meaningful way. In 1 to 2 months from now, you'll be attending open houses hosted by programs. Some of them do this live, and if they do, definitely go to the programs you're interested in, and be sure that if you are Zooming in, to include your full name, obviously, in the Zoom, because the more times they see your name, the more they get familiar with it. So when they get an application from you with your name on it, that's going to seem familiar. And for humans, the more familiar something is, the higher their opinion is of it, typically. Okay? Not all programs have these live open houses. Some of them just have a recorded webinar that they've done in the past. And if that's the case, definitely watch it, right? And you can include that on your CV as well. You'll want to start drafting out your statement of purpose and responses to the writing prompts for the different schools. Okay? As you do this, be sure to kind of point out or kind of sift through the website to understand why that school thinks it's special, right? All programs think they bring something special to the table. And so you want to know what that school thinks is special about itself. And then you can decide if your values and your needs are appropriately lining up with that school's kind of strengths or the things that they think set them apart. At this point, it is strongly recommended that you have someone review your documents, okay? And by documents, I mean your CV and your statement of purpose, and then some programs also have like a personal statement. And all the schools might have slightly different prompts. So this is not like a one essay fits all situation. You're going to need to vary it up a little bit depending on what the prompts are. But the reason why a document review would be recommended is to make sure that you're presenting a coherent narrative. So from the start of your paper to the end of your paper, what are we doing, right? This should not be just a regurgitation of your CV just in written form. Okay? That's not what they're looking for, and that will not be successful. So what we want to see happening in your statement of purpose is that you really hook us in at the beginning with something interesting, like catch our attention. And then as we move through this statement of purpose, we're kind of seeing your most GC-esque qualities and understanding that you have the analytical skills and the insight to be successful as a student counselor. Okay? Now, multiple sessions can also be helpful, especially if you're applying to a lot of schools that have really different prompts, so that we can tailor all of this to the schools as needed. And then also in this time, you'll want to just check in, do some course corrections, make you stay on track, and then get support. So small group coaching is actually a really excellent way of just checking in with other applicants, and also with a genetic counselor on individual topics to make sure you're on track. It can be a really cost-effective way to do that as well. And we'll talk more about those small groups and what that looks like towards the end here. So 3 to 4 months from now, that's a good time to check in again with the people who are writing your letters of recommendation. Like, did they remember that they need to do that for you? Do they have what they need to be able to do that? So make sure you're giving them clear deadlines and clear guidance on how to submit those letters of recommendations. And again, sometimes that's as simple as giving them the email address that they should send their letters to. Other times it's like a portal situation for some schools. So you can always check in with that program to find out how they want to receive those letters. There's also, sometimes you get information after you've submitted your documents, and they're like, great, thank you for applying. Have your letter writers submit their recommendations here, and they'll grant access to a portal that way. At this point, keep adding to the experiences on your CV. So book clubs, we do a couple each year, webinars, meetings. Even after you've applied, continue to add to your CV. So don't stop, even though I know you'll be tired at this point. I understand, but you want to keep adding so that you can still show that you're continuing to grow and put in effort. Okay? And then it's time to actually apply, right? To actually send in your information and send it out into the world. And there's a couple ways to approach this, right? So you can try to get it all done before the holidays, whatever holidays you celebrate, so that you can not have to worry about it at that point. Or if you don't think you'll be done at that time, then definitely budget time for yourself around the holidays so that you have time to spend with the people who are important to you and still enjoy that time, okay, and take a break from the stressful application process. 5 months from now, so this is January, okay, that's when the interview invitations will start rolling in. And this is going to be staggered. So some schools will be sending out their invitations while other schools are still accepting applications. So people, depending on the programs they apply to, some people will still be getting interview invitations in like late February. So this is kind of a long time period. But what we saw last year, and this is not just GC Prep, but this is from the National Match Service, that successfully matched candidates averaged 6 to 7 interviews. So they likely applied to more than that programs. Okay? That's not always possible for some people given financial means, but we did see that average for the number of interviews of those who were successful. Okay? You will also want to practice your interviewing skills a lot. Okay? Again, this is not a time to repeat your CV. We're not repeating your statement. We will need more detail. We will need more analysis than you were able to put in your statement of purpose. And this is not like a job interview. Okay? With jobs, when you're interviewing, you're saying, here are my skills. This is why I would be successful at doing this position. Train me for a couple months and then I'll be self-sufficient. That's not what we're looking for out of grad school. Grad school is all about learning, right? You will not know everything you need to know to be a genetic counselor when you graduate from school, but what they need to see is that you have a willingness and a hunger to learn and to progress and to start developing the skills that you need. So when we approach interviews, they need to see that you have like the beginnings of this teachability and this the beginnings of being able to understand and emotionally process some of the experiences that you'll have with other people, your interpersonal interactions. Okay? And through all this process with interviewing, admissions needs to see you. And again, a common problem that we see with applicants is because they're nervous, which is super reasonable, but because they're nervous and they want to come off as professional and skilled and just a really good candidate, they tend to like put up a wall, like I want to be perfect. So here is a facade that I have created for you that I think is the ideal applicant. But that's, if we present that wall, it's not successful. So one of the things that we can do as we practice interviewing is help break down that wall and allow you to feel comfortable showing your most authentic self. And that's why another one of our strong recommendations at this point is to do mock interviews. Okay? Some people last year did several sessions. Some people just did one session. We saw much better outcomes when people did more than one session because we just had more time to practice, for them to practice. We got to ask them more questions for them to practice. And as we got to know people over a couple of sessions, we were able to tease out their, I call it your brand. You might call it your vibe, whatever is kind of the theme that you want admissions to remember about you. So for someone last year, it was, I can do hard things. They've been through a lot in their life. And so even though grad school is going to be hard for them, they had proven that they could do hard things in the past. For another person, it was, I'm a grower. Here's all the ways that I have grown. I know I can grow in this program. And for someone else, it was tenacity, right? They refused to give up on the things that they really wanted in life, and they really wanted this. And so those were just a couple examples of how, meeting with someone multiple times, the coach was able to understand what a core strength of that person was, and then reflect it back to them and be like, hey, you're actually really good at this. And then they could kind of focus their answers and their interviewing presence around that key points that they wanted the program to know about them. Okay? We can also, through these mock interviews, we can also help you consider your experiences getting down to deeper and deeper levels of analysis, because those deeper levels are what admissions wants to see you get to, right? The surface, shallow stuff is not appealing. We need to dive down deeper and understand the emotional significance of the things that you've experienced and what it's taught you about you. And so your coach or mentor can help you be guided along that journey into kind of the more insightful parts of the things that you've experienced. Okay? And at this point, around interviewing time, stay off the discussion boards and the chat rooms, like Discord, okay? So it's totally fine if you're on like the applicants Discord group, that's totally fine. There can be good support there. And it's a good place to meet other applicants. Hooray, it's a good resource. But around the time of interviews, people start freaking out, understandably, because they're nervous, right? And it's all right to do that, but they're asking for help from other applicants, which is not the right pool to be asking help from. And so it just becomes a really anxiety-laden, kind of frenzied atmosphere in the chat room around this time of the year. And so it's not a very emotionally healthy place for you to be. So I usually advise people around this time, just stay out of there. And if you need help, turn to those who can help you, like the coaches at GC Prep, for example. After that, 6 to 7 months from now, programs will be doing their interviews. You do not have to feel like you compete with the other people that interview on the same day as you. All of you could match, right? So you don't have to feel intimidated if you see other people in a Zoom room. Okay? You'll need to rank your schools by preference, and that deadline is the 11th of April. Do not rank a program that you do not want to go to, okay? If you cannot afford it, if you do not want to go there, if you felt uncomfortable for discrimination reasons, for example, and you don't want to go there, do not rank it at all, okay? Because if you get accepted, or if you match with a program, that is a contract. You are obligated to go there. And if an applicant matches and then backs out and decides not to go to that program, they will be barred from the next match cycle. So they'd have to wait 2 years to apply it again. Okay, so if you don't want to go somewhere after interviewing, do not rank. Okay? Then it's waiting, which is super obnoxious. That's a really uncomfortable time for a lot of people because there's nothing more that you can do. And so this is when self-care becomes important because that's the only thing you can do at that point. And then match day is April 19th of next year. And at that point, matched applicants will prepare for school. Those who are unmatched can decide what they're doing to move forward. So that might be apply again, that might be decide to pursue a different career. Occasionally, there are several unmatched seats, like the algorithm didn't fully fill all the seats at a program. That didn't happen last year, everything was full, but the years before that, there were a couple of seats each year that were not filled. And so really enthusiastic applicants can call around to the programs and ask if they have any open seats. And if they do, then you can go through the whole application process. So why consider coaching and mentorship, right, in general? Not even just through GC Prep, but getting any type of genetic counselor to coach you through this process. Okay? Well, there are things that you know, right? So all your efforts in your undergrad studies and your experiences and things that you've already done in talking to genetic counselors and the things that you've learned, and you know what your goals are for the future. And you know that there's some things that you don't know, right? And when you don't know something, then you go look it up online, or you ask a genetic counselor, or you participate in counselor interviews. But there are also some things out there that you don't know that you don't know. And these items are the most concerning because you can't address them on your own. You can't look them up if you don't know that they're there. So this category of knowledge requires someone else to inform you and then to help you. And if you're applying, which you all are, then you've never successfully completed this process before, obviously. And so there's certainly items in this category that we can help you with. And as coaches and genetic counselors, we've been through this process. We know what these things are that you might not know yourself, and we can guide you through them so that the pool of things that you don't know becomes much smaller, and we start taking care of that. Okay. Also, the field of genetic counseling just attracts the anxious population. I have anxiety. Multiple people in my class have anxiety. Multiple genetic counselors that I've worked with have anxiety. It's very common, right? So many of you probably have anxiety. That's not an issue, okay? If it's treated and managed well, it does not have to be a thing. But unchecked and untreated and really unguided, the anxiety process can really derail you, because this is a long-term process of applying. And so coaching can really help make sure that you're staying on track, that you have accurate information reflected back to you as far as your value as an applicant and as a human. It can really help support you and give you confidence and let you know, yes, what you have put together is working, this is good, and will help you know if you're likely to be successful at this process and if you have a good product that you're sending in. Okay. So specifically, how can GC Prep help you? So at our core, we have the educational videos. There's 24 hours of those. We kind of talked about the 11 hours that are counselor interviews, and those are not uncensored, but like they're unfiltered. I really wanted to get an authentic look at the field. So we talked about the good things and the bad things and the things we wish we were different, that were different about the field of genetic counseling. And so those are great because we tried to do a pretty big cross section of specialties and roles and genders and phases in career. So those can be really helpful. We also have an interview with Janice as program director and also Janelle as an assistant program director. So that can be helpful, hearing what they think they're looking for when they're assessing an applicant. Okay. We also have videos that are specifically about just the field in general. So what are the pros and cons of GC? What are the specialties like? What are some ethics that you need to think about coming into this? What are the diversity issues? And then there's a third module that's all about applications. So videos on CV, on statement of purpose, for international applicants, how to get the most out of your crisis work, how to prepare for interviews. So there's a lot of really good meat in those educational videos. And the goal there was to take people from like a basic level of understanding or level of understanding that you might be able to get from free resources out there and go from basic to like moderately advanced and as far as we can get without personal help. And then once you've reached that level, then if you do decide to do one-on-one or in-person counseling, you're starting from an advanced place already. And so all the information you get after that is really high yield and really specific to yourself, because we don't have to spend time kind of going over these more basic concepts because you already know them from the educational videos. If people do decide to do kind of live sessions, we have the small groups. We have a couple of those a month. They're on specific topics. Like one of them will be on, writing your CV, and another one will be on the statement of purpose, and one will be on confidence building. And I believe we're trying to get a series for reapplicants for small groups going here in the next little bit. The ratio is 6 applicants to 1 genetic counselor. And so that will give you an opportunity to ask your specific questions, but also hear the questions of other people. And that can increase your knowledge as well, and things that maybe you didn't think about before. Okay. More specifically and individually, we have single coaching sessions like a document review and a mock interview. Those things. We also have premium with Janice, our program director. But we really saw the most growth and the most success out of people who ended up doing a limited series, which is 3 to 6 sessions specifically on document review or interviews. Okay, so those are discounted compared to that number of sessions if done individually through singles. And right now we'll probably be open now till January, so we'll be open for document reviews, and then starting January to probably March, limited series will be open for mock interviews. And again, lots of growth happens with multiple sessions there. And then for people who really want a holistic guidance of this process, there's mentorship. And that can be from 24 up to 24 sessions. And because it's done by our GCs and life coaches, they're really focused on what each applicant needs for all of them to be successful. So yes, you can ask questions on document review. Yes, you can do mock interviews. You can do all the things that you would do with these other services. But in addition to that, with this mentorship, you can do like confidence building exercises, and you can kind of talk about your concerns and what your fears are and how you want to improve. And it's just more holistic, and there's guidance beyond just what these other sessions can offer, and super tailored. Okay. So do these things work? Like, what is the real numbers value? How much will they improve your likelihood of matching? So this is what we saw from last cycle. So anyone who engaged in any of our coaching services, whether that was an in-person session or the educational videos, on average doubled their match rate. Those who used the educational videos, whether they were on their own or with other services, the educational videos on their own have about a 14 to 15% increase in matching. Okay, so we saw that here with people who use them on their own, a 26 to 40% increase. And then those who did the coaching services that were live without the educational videos, compared to those who did coaching services with the educational videos, there's about a 15% difference. Okay, so 14 to 15% with the videos. Those who participated in small groups, we saw a huge proportion matching. This N was fairly small, so I'm going to watch this number over the next couple of years. But people who seem to have regular check-ins on their application process through each step of the way seem to be more focused and more guided as they kind of submitted their applications and moved through that process. Last year, everyone who did a document review session with us, even if it was just one, all of those people got interviews. So we took them from a 51% chance of getting an interview, that's the national average, to 100% interviews. And those who did the document review, whether premium or standard, did see an increase. Now, last year, we did not have the limited series yet. We hadn't come up with that idea. So I predicted this number will increase this next year as people do a limited series and have more than one document review session. I predict that will increase. By the time mock interviews rolled around, we did have limited series, and that was really critical because when people did just one mock interview session, their rate of matching didn't really change. I mean, it went up slightly if they did it with Janice, but for people who had multiple sessions of mock interviews, that's where we saw their match rate go up to 87% or higher. So again, we can't guarantee that anyone will match. No one can guarantee that, but we can guarantee that we will help you improve your chances. Okay. So some upcoming events here, and there are more on the calendar that we have on the GC Prep website. But September 13th and 14th, there's a small group on selecting schools wisely, another one on the 26th about finishing touches for an application. So things to think about beyond just writing your statement. What are some flourishes that you can put on there? On the 28th, there's a free book club and also a small group on confidence building to find your strengths. And then in October, on the 11th and 12th, there are small groups on writing your statement of purpose, and then another book club on the 20th. And I believe that one in October is taught by Janice Berliner on one of the books that she wrote. So if you are considering applying to BayPath, you cannot do a premium service with Janice, but you are absolutely welcome to attend the book club that Janice hosts. That is totally fine. Again, we're also trying to get a small group series that's aimed at reapplicants going. There'll be more of these small groups being offered. So definitely make sure, if you're not already, sign up for like our email. So basically become a member on our site, and then you'll get email updates whenever we do have a new service. We send out periodic emails once every couple of weeks. I'm too busy to spam people with emails every day. But every 3 or so weeks, we send out an email with updates and offerings and sometimes discount codes. So I would recommend getting on our list for that. Okay. So that is everything for today. Okay, so if you have any unanswered questions that are simple, you can reach out to me at support@gcprepllc.com. If you have more advanced or really specific questions that are going to take more time, then you can book unstructured time, which is just 45 minutes with a genetic counselor. Ask your questions, interview us, whatever you need to do. We're all yours for 45 minutes. And then we'll, of course, post this webinar in the next couple of days on GC Prep. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing. And if you have any questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat, and then Jessica can pitch me those.
Is there anyone other than Janice that can do premium sessions if someone is considering applying to BayPath?
This is a good question. The formal answer today is no, but I do have someone who we've been kind of talking to a few months ago who used to be an assistant program director at a different program, and she's no longer an assistant program director, so there is no conflict of interest there. So she would also be premium. So I hope that in the next month or two, we can offer that, because we don't want to eliminate these premium services for people who are applying to BayPath. But if you are, then the standard services would be totally fine, and there's no conflict of interest there as well.
What's the average number of programs that successful applicants apply to?
So technically, we don't know that answer. And when I say we, I mean programs in the match service, because everybody registers with the match, but they only collect data on people who rank programs. And the only people who are ranking programs are people that interviewed. So the 50-ish% of people who didn't get extended in interviews, we don't know how many they applied for. In general, I recommend applying to 5 to 8. If there's a potential issue with your application, like a lower GPA or something like that, then we need to be more strategic with where you apply, because some schools have like hard cutoffs for their GPAs and others are more flexible. They're willing to consider a situation, but also applying to more schools just to increase your chances. But we don't know for sure like how many people are formally applying to, because that is not collected anywhere.
I will say too, the program director, who's no longer, she retired, but Bonnie Leroy, when I was applying, she gave a ton of lectures to potential applicants, and she had always said 5 to 7, which tracks with Michaela, your comment, and that was like 7 or more years ago. So I feel like that's still kind of, it might change
Yeah.
as there's more and more schools, but it seems to have stayed fairly constant. And she had said
Yeah.
those 5 to 7 were like, at least you're getting an interview, is what she had
Yeah.
said.
I would, if anything, I would say, like if it's changed at all, it has probably shifted up, just because things are more competitive and there's more applicants. So it's an expensive process. It's applying to all the schools, unfortunately.
Yeah. If you have done informational interviews and or shadowing with professionals in the field that are not genetic counselors, should they still be included on your CV, such as like interviewing with a geneticist?
Yes. I mean, if you're interviewing like an HR person, no. But if it's like someone related to the field of genetics, yes. And I recommend including like one sentence summary or insight of what you got out of that interview. Okay. And we discussed this a lot in our video on writing your CV, because you're not just, you don't just want to use your CV as like, here's a list of things I have done, but you want to use that opportunity to be like, here's what I did, and here's what I got out of it that helps move forward this insight, genetic counseling insight that you want to show that you're really thinking about. And so, yeah, just I would recommend being like, yes, I interviewed with so-and-so who's in this position. This is when I did it. We talked about thing X and I learned about blah, 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 right? So you don't want to have things too cluttered, but a small piece of insight to sum that up is going to be fine, especially if you watch our interview videos, right? You weren't there actually doing the interview yourself. So having a line about your analysis or insight can make that experience more valuable on your CV.
Would there be any drawbacks in applying to 10 to 12 schools?
It's expensive. I mean, that's the main drawback, right? And the other, I mean, it's expensive, it's time consuming. All their prompts are going to be slightly different. So it's just a lot to keep straight. But if you're organized, then it's fine. What sometimes happens is that people will write a statement and then they'll be like, and that's why I want to apply to Northwestern. And then they send a statement of purpose that says, and that's why I want to apply to Northwestern, to Mount Sinai or to some other school. So if you are applying to multiple programs, which I hope you are, just make sure that if you specifically mention a school name, that you're double and triple checking that is the right school, because nothing is as much of a turnoff as seeing a different school name in the statement of purpose.
Also say one of my cohorts, so one of the individuals who was a student when I was, had applied to 10 and got in. So
yeah,
it's not bad from an application or like a reviewing perspective.
Yeah, I mean, from an odds perspective, the more shots you take at the target, the more like you are to hit it, right? And so applying to more can increase your chances. Applying to just one or two, I don't recommend just applying to one or two. I'm going to be honest about that. And different counselors have different opinions on that. I don't recommend it. If you feel bound by location, like if you can't leave and go to a program, there are 2 remote programs that you can consider, in addition to any that might be near you. But usually 1 or 2 is just not sufficient unless you have really good grades and you know your insight and analytical skills are like on point, right? In one of our videos, we interview a counselor. His name is Nathan. He's my friend from work, and he applied to a bunch of schools the first time and did not get in anywhere. But he loved Sarah Lawrence, and he knew, like, I have to go to Sarah Lawrence. That's the only place for me. And so the next cycle, he only applied to Sarah Lawrence, and he put all his efforts into improving what they specifically wanted to improve, and he did match there. So he's kind of the exception to the rule, but he's a very like, all right, whatever happens, happens. I'm just going to take a shot type person. And it's not a strategy that I would typically recommend for most people, but for him, it worked out. So there's no like one way to do this, but in general, the more the better. But again, make sure that when you're applying, you at least think you'd be happy going there, right? If you know you wouldn't want to go somewhere, don't apply. Just a waste of your time and money and their time. But if you think, yeah, I could be happy there, then go ahead and apply. And if things change after your interviews, that's fine. You don't have to rank them.
What is the pricing like for GC Prep's services?
Yeah, so it varies, right? It depends on what service you're doing and if it's premium or regular. The small groups are $30, right, per session. And then mentorship, that's like longer term, is actually the best deal. That's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck as far as time and the cost per hour. The next best deal is the limited series, and the more sessions you do, the deeper the discount, right? And then for the individual sessions, for a standard session that's not premium, it's about $100 an hour, and most of that goes to the counselor because we pay our counselor as well. And compared to other coaching services, professional coaching services, service coaching services for medical school, etc., it's very inexpensive. We tried to make it as inexpensive as possible, and I know, like, I wish we could offer it even cheaper, but that is where we're at to barely stay in business, like, frankly. Other questions? I think we can take maybe one more and then we'll wrap up, because I know we are over time and I want to respect people's time here.
What are your thoughts on an interviewer? Hold on, wait. Okay. What are your thoughts on when an interviewer asks the interviewee how many schools they applied for? I heard from former applicants that some interviewers asked this question. If you need me to reread it without all the interruptions, I'm sorry.
We're good.
Okay.
Like, if they ask you how many schools you apply for.
Yeah.
I just tell them the answer. I applied to 6. I applied to 8. I applied to whatever. And then I'm not sure what the interview was hoping to gain from that, because most people would apply to many. So I don't know if they're trying to like suss out if you only apply to their school and therefore you'd only rank them.
I know
It's not allowed for programs to like try to strike up a match deal with applicants, right? They can't ask you like, so are you going to rank us high? Like that is not allowed. So this could be a question that's like starting down that path a little bit. Or they, I don't know. I don't think it's a very helpful question for them to ask personally, but I don't think it's bad to just say how many you applied for, and then you can follow it up with something that you're really interested in about that particular school. I applied to 6, but I'm really interested in this program because blah, 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 blah. That would be a good way to answer that question. Jessa, what are your thoughts?
I was just gonna say a long time ago, there was like a rumor that they wanted you to be specific, but that has proven not true. So by specific meaning like, it's like they didn't want you to apply to 10. This was like a decade ago or longer. As at least that's what it felt like from an applicant perspective at the time. But as I mentioned, like I have colleagues who applied to 10 that got in. So
Yeah.
But I agree, like I don't recall ever being asked that question. I think I was asked, have you applied to others without asking which or how many? And it was
Yeah.
just like, I did the same thing. I said, yeah, but I'm most excited for, or this school is my top. If it was my top, like I wouldn't lie. If it was my top at the time, I would say so. Um, so, but again, remembering with what Michaela said is it's small that they do talk. So if you go to 10 interviews and you've told all of them they're your top and someone says something, just don't lie. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, just don't lie. Yeah. And you know, in the past, as Jessica mentioned, like 10 years ago, they did not have the match. So it was this really obnoxious process of like, hi, you're accepted. Do you want to come here? Oh, maybe you're waiting to hear back from some other school. All right, well, let us know in a couple of days. And you had like a week to decide where you were going. It was like super annoying.
Oh,
and everybody was just like,
it was 3 days. It was awful. The match sounds delightful.
Yeah. So it's not like that anymore. It's just like you match, you get an email, you're done, right? You find out yes or no on that day. And so there's less jostling than there used to be in the past. And it's all done by an algorithm. And we discuss how that algorithm works in one of our videos. But that has taken a lot of this like competition essentially out of the programs, because they just do what they do during interviews and you do what you do during interviews, and then both of you separately like rank each other where you want to be, and then a computer goes, yes, match, 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 match. So we'll go ahead and end here. Again, if you have any other questions, go ahead and email us at support@gcprepllc.com. I answer those, so you'll be hearing directly from me. All specific pricing for all of these things can be found on our website. You can find the educational videos there. You can go over to coaching and see all of the services. If you're interested in limited series, which is 3 to 6 sessions, we do offer a free like 15-minute orientation to that, just to discuss what your particular needs are. And so if you schedule that, it would be a time you'd meet with me, we'd chat about it, and then we'd get you set up with one of our coaches to be able to do that based on what you need. Okay. So I think that's it, but thank you guys so much for coming, and take care. Best of luck in this process.